Hey, I was a conscript in the South African Army in 1988 and 89. Used to have to do 2 years. 1989 was the last year of having to do 2 years of compulsory military service as Nelson Mandela was led out of jail and we moved towards the first free and fair elections in South Africa. But I was based up in northern Zululand near a town called Matubatuba in 121 Battalion, which was a Zulu battalion with a small cadre of white officers, but all the troops and a lot of the non-commissioned officers were Zulus. And one of the things that was going on in my area, because I was the law officer covering a very large area of northern Zululand up to the Swaziland-Mozambique border, was a small group of recce officers. That was like our equivalent of the SAS, Navy SEALs type soldiers, training local Zulu men to go up to the townships and the mine hostels around Johannesburg and in the Transvaal to deliberately foment racial tension and violence with other tribes based in those hostels and townships. And this was a very deliberate strategy of the South African government and the South African military at the time to create black-on-black violence, to detract from the potential for black-on-white violence.
Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about divide and conquer and how black people were pitted against themselves during colonization and slavery. This is a tactic that was used all across Africa, and it's unfortunate because what they brewed during colonization did not end with colonization. Tribes were pitted against each other until this day. They have still not been able to make 100% peace with themselves. A lot of people wonder why Africa is so tribalistic. Well, this is the foundation of where the whole madness started from. Same thing was done in the diaspora as well. Although they did not use tribe, but they found their way, and we still suffer from it till this day, focusing on attacking ourselves rather than attack the true enemy,
which in those days was very low because we had a very strong and violent police force repressing that side of things. But there was this massive deflection that went on right up until I left the army at the end of 1989. And a lot of white people don't know that, is that there was a very deliberate strategy, because what white people in South Africa at the time, and no doubt for some period afterwards, were often saying is, these blacks can't run a country because they're always fighting each other. These tribes hate each other, right? The Zulus hate the Xhosas, who hate the Ndebele, who hate this guys, the Pondos, and this kept saying that basically that blacks were too violent to run a country. And what most people have no idea of is that violence, that intertribal violence, was fomented by the white South African government, army and police force very deliberately. So we need to revise our idea of history, not just the recent history, the pre-apartheid history of South Africa, but the entire history of European and white domination of Africa, and the way that that was presented to us through our education curriculum, the things we believe about the history of Africa and colonialism are not what actually happened, and are certainly not how Africans experienced that. Let's bear that in mind, people. Come on.
we all know that colonization happened and it was bad, but the real truth of exactly what happened, like the cocoa of the situation during colonization, hasn't been told yet. This is one man sharing his story of true life encounters and situations that definitely did not make it into the history books. In the history books, they will say, oh, they were just very violent people that hated themselves. They were always going to war and unaliving one another. They were very barbaric and backward and uncivilized, uneducated, uncouth. That's what they will put in the history books. They would not put all those terrible things that they did. Like I said, this is one man sharing his experience, saying the truth of exactly what went down. Victors write history, right? So we can only imagine the chunk of things that they left out. This is why it is sacrosanct that true history be taught, because a whole lot of things we are dealing with in the present is as a result of what happened in the past. But we have no idea and cannot even make the connection. When you do not know where you are coming from, you may not be able to tell exactly where you are going. There are problems that we presently cannot solve because we have not been able to pinpoint the source of the problem. This is why I hate it when I meet people who want to tackle present day issues without acknowledging what happened in the past. The past can't be exclusive to the past, especially when the past is still the present. They make comments like this, like Europeans were not having stupid wars where they were just unaliving themselves left, right, center, up and down in Europe. They've always had hate in them and always wanting to be destructive and cause mayhem. All they did was channel that hate and desire to cause destruction towards other group of people. Like they hated and unalived themselves for years. I would even argue they don't even presently love themselves. They were just able to unify with their whiteness to go unalive other people and exploit. That's the only thing uniting these people, their whiteness. If you take that away, they hate themselves because history shows us that. Now, don't get me wrong. This is not me saying that there were no disputes at all in Africa. Of course, there were disputes. Where there are humans, there's bound to be disagreements. But we always found a way to solve our problems and made peace. Until they came, that is. And not only were they creating disputes amongst us, they were funding the disputes. They literally created fire and continued to pour fuel on it until the fire blew out of proportion, and here we are.
And I know that I've got guys in the comments going, that never happened. It's like, mate, I was there. And the reason I know this happened is not because 121 Battalion was directly involved in this, but because we had bases at Josini and Dumu and these places, and these recce bastards would come out of the bush from doing this training and get drunk and talk too much. This was not something being done by 121 Battalion. This was being done by or facilitated by the recce's and other units and covert operatives in that area, because it couldn't be above the line. It was below the line activity. And the trouble was, the only reason I know about this is because these psychopaths would come out the bush when we'd be sitting around a braai on the Mozambique border having a nice time, and they would completely fuck up our lives by their aggression, their stupid games, their drunkenness. These were miserable psychopathic people, man. I used to hate it. There were many, many times when I would rather go and sleep in my truck in the bush than be in the base when these guys came in, because they were awful, awful people. And they were doing awful, awful things. Yes, tribal animosity existed, but we took it, we weaponized it, and many, many people died as a result.
This is one man sharing his truth, and I'm grateful he did. We need more people like him. Bless his heart. See, we are presently working with half-truths and whitewash history, and even that is terrible when you hear it. And I wonder exactly how bad it will be if they actually do tell the truth, the unfiltered truth. Because if the filtered one is this bad, the one we know of, and we know that's not the entirety, how bad was it really if we hear about the real stuff? And we do need to hear about the real stuff.
Hey, this is absolutely true. It's almost as if Africa had no history prior to the arrival of white Europeans. And that, of course, is completely absurd. But what it means is that an entire centuries of history have just been erased as if they didn't exist, and nobody can be bothered to recreate and teach that history because, hey, why bother? But one of the things, just one of the things to note, is that the richest man in history, in all of history, a man whose wealth made Elon Musk look like a fucking peasant, was a king in northern West Africa called Mansa Musa, who was so rich that it is estimated that by today's standards, he would be worth $500 billion. And nobody knows that. Well, I say nobody, but you have to really dig in to find that out, because we think that all culture, all wealth really just emerged from Renaissance Europe. And we point to African history and other parts of the world as saying, look how uncivilized they were. Look how they were always fighting each other. Look how they just killed each other. Look how they hadn't invented things. Look how they lived this nomadic subsistence lifestyle. And we, white Europeans, changed all of that during the Enlightenment and with the Industrial Revolution. But what did we really change? Okay, we upped the standard of living, but at what cost? And that's why I talk about colonialism so much, is that it's as if prior to that, Europeans weren't tribal little groups killing each other at random, having constant wars. Italy was only a country, made a country in the 1800s. We think that Europe's history is unsullied series of developments, and we look at Africa and say, well, it wasn't developing until we came along, and that's just horseshit. It was. We just weren't privy to that history, right? And so we only look at it from that white European perspective, and that's distressing. It's the same for South America. It's the same for Asia. And what Europeans are now calling revisionist history is actually just the discovery of the real history. So come on, people. Let's have an open mind to this, and let's look to the source of history rather than Europeans' very convenient rewriting of it.